Have I missed something here? It seemed to me it's almost, I don't think we can touch 4511 on the basis of what I see here until we have a very clear idea of exactly how money's gone into it, why money is into it at the level it is, why the variability is in it, and what the consequences of taking any action are. That doesn't help us with our budget today, but we got off on this tangent. But I sure can't, on the basis of what I see here, support any suggestion that somehow we'll move some of this and move it around a bit, and then we'll be solving those numbers up on the board. I think that's, we don't have a basis for that at all, unless, again, I have missed a whole paragraph of explanation here that has not been properly factored into my thinking.
Thank you. Supervisor Pinches, I believe, is next.
On the break, I got some records on this teeter plan. I just got this from, I assume, the auditor's office. I guess because we were talking a little bit earlier about a $17 million teeter debt. Now you're on this sheet, it's $13 million. So
It's correct at 13 and a half. The $17 million estimate was based on my understanding that the 2007-2008 delinquency had not yet been transferred in, but it had been. So the total debt is 13.5.
Yeah, last year, at 6/30/07, which is basically the end of the fiscal year last year, it was 9.7 million. Now it's, well, that's better than 17, because I knew last year we were talking about around a $7 million figure, and now, of course, we didn't pay the interest, so it brought that up. And the interest in 6/07 was $776,000. That's the note on this page that I got from last year's stuff. That was the interest for 6/07.
The interest is being paid externally from this particular spreadsheet. It's actually being charged to the budget unit 1930, which is the teeter plan. It doesn't show up here at all. This is strictly principal.
So what we need is another 2-hour break, because in the last 15 minutes, we brought the teeter debt down from 17 million to 13. So let's take an hour off and we'll balance it.
Supervisor Smith.
It's a magical meeting, isn't it?
Well, to Supervisor Pinch's point, not his last point, but the one before, in terms of that we've seen it reduce, but the auditor just made the comment, this does not include the interest. So let's go back to the executive office staff and translate the sheet from the auditor that we just received on the actual teeter account activity, showing a balance of 13.5 million roughly. That's of 6/30/08. So I guess we'd need to know at what increments are the adjustments posted? Is it quarterly? Is it yearly? Is it semi-yearly? And then we need to get back then to the discussion and infuse this debt on the teeter that is now documented at 13.5, and we need to interface that with the interest and get an accurate reporting of the interest that I believe Ms. Glassy said was in the range of 700,000.
The interest amount that was paid in fiscal 2007-2008 was about $1 million, and it was paid for in budget unit 1930.
And when was that paid? What?
Quarterly, when the interest apportionment is done.
So what have the payments been in 07-08 fiscal year?
That's what I just said. They were about $1 million total, yes.
In 07-08?
Yes.
Okay, so it's dropped then to 700,000 for 08-09?
No. At the time that the proposed budget was made, the $700,000 was my estimate at that time. Okay. It should be adjusted.
So it would go up, I'm assuming?
Yes. As much as this balance has gone up, then yes, so too is the associated interest.
Well, I think we might need another break. I mean, if we really want to get down to a very, very critical, this is probably the most critical component of the county's debt obligation that isn't fully accounted for, fully addressed, and we're not in the constant repayment procedures that we are with the other debt. And I think that that's how more or less Ms. Glassy has described it to date. So I think if we want to get clear on exactly, so we don't have any confusion, it's very clear for the next budget cycle. We have it in its own budget unit now, and I think the auditor sheet here is clear. It's 13.563 million. But I think we need to be really clear about then that interest, because we're weaving, in other words, we're weaving into not only this year's fiscal budget, that it's now gone, it sounds like it's gone from 700,000 upwards to more towards 1 million. That's gonna, I don't know how we can have a balanced budget if we don't factor that in. I mean, I think we have to have those numbers to factor into the real final budget going forward. I just don't see how we cannot.
And I believe that's what Allison had alluded to earlier, that we needed to add another $500,000 at least to meet the interest payment.
But I think she said 500,000, figuring that the sum total was 700,000, because we have in the proposed budget a $200,000 credit, if you will, to that scenario. But I don't think we prepared for 1 million. I think we only, according to your comments, Ms. Glassy, it was 700,000. So it seems like we're coming up 300,000 short on the teeter.
What I had indicated is that 700,000 is what was budgeted for interest, and that is true. If the budget gets revised upwards to 1 million, then you subtract 200,000 from 1 million, and it gives you $800,000 short.
So in other words, if we don't pay that at $800,000 this year, that's added on to this growing total with interest for next year. I mean, there's no other way around that.
The fact of the matter is that it needs to get paid, and
Yes.